everyone, and welcome to Unique Peace. I am Janice. I'm a Reiki Master Teacher, psychic medium, and self-care coach here on Long Island, New York. Today, I'm going to discuss what triggers us. And when we stop to think about it, how can what triggers us bring us peace? By acknowledging our triggers, facing them, or at least accepting them, we can find peace. So let's start off with what triggers you. There's a multitude of things that come to mind. Politics, your family, your boss, your significant other, your kids, traffic. A multitude of things can trigger us. Personally, in the last few days, I have been triggered personally by relationships. I have been triggered by work. I have been triggered by politics. And when I stopped to take a look, it's like, why is this bothering me? What is this inciting in me? I mean, there's a song where the refrain is, let's start a riot. And a part of me was like, well, okay, why do I want to start a riot? And so I had to take a couple steps back and say, why am I so triggered? Why is this bothering me? In the case of work specifically, clients specifically, I am not your typical healer. I'm not a medical professional. I'm not a pilot. I'm not anything that you would say is putting somebody's life on the line. I help energetically. I help your medical. I help you with your healing journey. So why is it am I being triggered? And acknowledging that was tricky for me. It's like, I know I'm helping these people. I know that I'm helping this person. Why is this so upsetting to me? And it was in this particular instance that I was very self aware of how I help and at the same time challenged. Like, well, how do you know? And it's one of those where I'm a firm believer in, you come to me for a Reiki or a reading, you sought me out and you would like my help. But sometimes, in this case, it was a reading, you don't like the messages that are given to you. I have to remind myself, I'm merely the mailman. If you want mom or dad or grandma to come through and they don't come through, I can't control what comes through. I can only ask for your guides to step forward, anybody on the other side to step forward, and deliver the messages with care, concern, compassion, and love. So when you don't hear from somebody on the other side, it can be very frustrating, especially if you want to hear from somebody on the other side. I know because I always wanted to hear from my dad. And it took decades before he came through for me. So why was I so triggered? It's like, I know what it's like to want to hear desperately from somebody on the other side. And I forgot for a moment. I forgot to put myself in the other person's shoes and say, wait a minute. They really want to hear from this person for whatever reason. And I shouldn't be triggered by that because I was that person. I know what it's like to want to hear from somebody on the other side so desperately. You want answers. And when you don't get them, you're frustrated, you're angry, you're upset. At the same time, the other person has to notice that they're triggered and maybe blocking some of the guidance they need, or maybe not self aware or ready to hear certain things, or maybe you are getting the message, you just don't want to receive it. So we take all of that into account. And what triggers us really makes us self-aware. It brings our self-awareness into play. We are hyper aware that something has made us mad. We are pissed off, or we are sad, or we are really happy. But why are we so triggered by this? What makes you really happy? You wouldn't see it as a trigger, but you keep on going for that hit. It's like a dopamine hit, right? It's like, oh, I want to get into a race car. That triggers you to be like really happy. Or I really want to go skydiving. I don't, but I know people who do. And that's a happiness trigger. It's a trigger of dopamine. But on the flip side, and what this is really about today is something that makes you mad, something that makes you sad, something that makes you upset. Taking a step back and say, why? Why am I upset? And then taking that look inside. Because the answer isn't outside. Outside triggered the inside. Sometimes it's hard to wrap our heads around that, but it's the truth. What is it in me that is triggering this? In this particular client, it was igniting a little bit of self-doubt. And being like, okay, well, if I didn't have that self-doubt as a medium, that I'm not doing it right. Because then you're like, I know I gave the right messages, but did I give the right messages? And you just have to do what my grandmother told me many times when it came to raising kids. You do the best you can, and when you set them out into the world, you hope you did it right. The same is true when I deliver messages. It's like, this is what came through, and I hope the other person gets something. However, when I get a resistant client, it does trigger me because it's like, okay, well, what did I do wrong? And you take a step in, and it's like, okay, well, there's always room for improvement. I'm self-aware. And I take into I personally take into consideration the feedback that I received, and I try not to take it personally because now I'm self-aware. Triggers bring us to a self-awareness. They also can bring us peace by taking a moment to self-reflect and say, could I have done that better? If the answer is yes, then you take the lesson, and in the future, remember, oh, this next time I'm going to do this way. Or you can say, no, I did that right, and that is the best I could have done in that situation, and move forward and be okay with that. And triggers also remind us of the work we still have to do. So, somebody who's in a relationship, and we've all had several relationships in life. We have the relationship with our parents, potentially our siblings, our grandparents, our spouses. What triggers us is very key there, because now we're learning that, oh, this is triggering me when my mom does this, or this is triggering me when my dad does this, or I really don't understand why my sister continues to do this, or my brother, he gets away with murder. Why is that bothering me? And when you take a look inside, it's like, okay, as the oldest with younger siblings, I can always tell you what triggers me, and what has always triggered me is when they get away with something that I never would have gotten away with. And when I take a step back, being the first pancake, as they say, it gave my parents an opportunity to learn, because as parents, kids don't come with instructions, and you do the best you can with what you have. Now, my son had a sibling. Each kid is different, so I would try what I thought would work, but at the same time, it might not work. And my parents had to deal with that, but I was there first. And because I was that first child, it triggers me that you would never let me get away with that. Or how come he gets to do that? Or wait a second, what do you mean I have to be the responsible one? And when I take a time out, as they say, and reflect, I take a moment to become self aware of all the things I've learned from that. There are a lot of things that I learned from that. It's like, okay, I learned that my parents could be easily manipulated by younger people after me because they just didn't want to focus on it. Or they figured, well, it didn't work with you, so I'm not going to fight with them. Or the gender differences. Well, it's your brother, and just because I'm a girl, that's different. But my brother did experience, well, it's your sister. And so the triggers that come to mind in the sibling relationship, especially, is the birth order. It's really the birth order. As the oldest, we tend to be resentful. But what I learned from a friend of mine who is the youngest is they become resentful because you get to do everything first. The first to drive, the first to go out, the first to do this, the first to do that. And it's like, wait, I'm the oldest. I earned that. I had to put up with my parents first. So my friend was genuinely triggered. Like, I was so jealous and I was so, why did he get to do all of this? And I looked at her, I go, we were also the first to be punished. We were also the first to, our parents had to figure out what worked and didn't work. And then when they got to you, they figured out, okay, well, this works in general and this works individually. And that didn't work with your brother, but it seems to work with you. So it's funny because she was triggered. But when you flip it and you become self aware, it's like, oh, okay. And now she has two boys, both whom have similarities and are very different. So she's learning. She's like calling up those, and it's like she's not triggered anymore by that. But those triggering moments have helped her in raising her son. She now understands what went through with her brother, and also as the youngest, what happened when you're the youngest. So she can help her younger son because she was in that position. Just like I can help an older child, the oldest, understand that, yeah, a lot of weight is on our shoulders and a lot of responsibility comes to us. And we're seen as the example, but our siblings are also looking up to us. And when you look at it from like, they're paying attention to what I'm doing, because let's face it, when we're young, the world is myopic. It's all about who we are and trying to fit in and not, rock the boat too much. I didn't really fit into that part, but it is triggering, trying to fit in. That was a trigger for me for many years, is trying to fit in. It was upsetting, actually, to be a Sesame Street song at home and in the real world. I use that term loosely. Because I never did feel like I fit in. There are times when I still don't, but it doesn't trigger me anymore. It's like, okay, I don't belong here. But it took a long time to reflect on why don't I belong here. And now I have a tribe of people, I have several little tribes of people where I do belong. But it took a while to get there, and it took a lot of self-reflection. It took a lot of learning to not give a damn. Learning to say, I have to be at peace with who I am and show up authentically as who I am. So when you show up authentically as who you are, if you are triggered, it's 9 times out of 10 because someone is telling you you don't fit in and you don't belong and you haven't done it this way. I'm guilty of triggering other people, and I'm guilty of using those triggers of my own, saying, well, why don't you do this and why don't you do this? And all I can really do when I'm triggered now is voice my opinion and be authentic and come from wanting them to see it from at least my point of view. That doesn't say change and conform. It's like, please flip it on the other side. I've had people say, well, I'm very empathetic. Empathy is really trying to see it from the other person's point of view, but at the same time, you're feeling all of their emotions. I'm very empathetic. I feel everybody's emotions. However, I also see their point of view. It doesn't mean I like their point of view, it means I see their point of view. I can put myself in their shoes and understand why they are feeling the way they are feeling. And it can also help them to help other people understand other people. Because now you're like, if I help you understand who you are, it's easier to understand where other people are coming from. It's like, I didn't think of it that way. Or it's really not that important. So when we think about our triggers, it's, what is it teaching me? Where is the work I need to do? At the same time, what triggers us, especially in relationships, might be, how can I help this person see it from the other side, from the receiving side? It took a long time for my mom to understand my side. It took her, I've been on the planet for 4 decades now. It took her, I would say, a good 30 plus years to understand it from my side. That's a long time. But hey, it worked, right? And to help my friend see it, and we were in college at the time, in 18 years, she's like, oh, I never saw it from the other point of view. So sometimes our triggers not only help us go inside, but it also helps us to help others see it from the other side, from a different point of view. I see it with my own son when he gets triggered. It's like, why is it upsetting to you? What is happening? And don't rush to blame others. You got to take accountability. There was one time, and I'm bringing up this very important and poignant story, that I sat with something for 6 months. I asked, why is this triggering me? Why is this bothering me? What's within me that, this is causing such anguish for? And it was in my relationship. And what it came down to is, it was a question of self-worth for me. And when I realized, it's like, I value myself, I'm showing up. Why isn't my other half understanding where I'm coming from? And why am I constantly dismissed? And it actually led to me blowing up. So I'm pretty mellow now. And that trigger has taught me a lot. It's like, I show up as my authentic self. What that trigger taught me is, I need to help my other half see the other side. He wasn't seeing my side. He was seeing his side and not seeing what the problem was. Why is this triggering you? Why is this upsetting you? It's nothing. It's, we've come to an understanding, clearly, because we're still together. But I sat with it for 6 months, and I dove within because I knew that this trigger was to teach me something. And the biggest thing that trigger taught me was self-acceptance, self-awareness, self-love, self-confidence. What it also taught me was to use my voice, speak up for myself, and not be afraid to say, this is hurting me, this is why it's hurting me, and why can't you see it from my point of view? When you want to put yourself in my shoes for a minute. I've put myself in your shoes. It's your turn to put yourself in my shoes. So when you're triggered in relationships is where it gets really tricky, because you love each other a really lot. You love each other so much that sometimes you don't see how you're triggering the other person or how your actions are triggering the other person. So when they're brought to the forefront, what's the first thing we get? Defensive. Right? Get defensive. Because we're triggered. And when people don't go inside and become self-aware because of their triggers, what does it lead to? Fights, resentment, sometimes contempt. It also leads to repeat arguments over the same thing. It becomes a cyclical battle. And in those cases, it's very important for you to remember the question, why is this triggering me? What do I have to see inside of myself? What do I have to help the other person see? And it's not a have to. What do I want? What would I like the other person to see? But you can't answer that question until you know inside, until you've gone inside. In the case of the argument, I wanted my other half, I wanted him to understand why this was upsetting me. Why? You know, the biggest thing was the energy of a third person involved. The third person involved. I picked up an energy that was not good. And at the same time, he picked up an energy that was good. Okay, so there's that difference right there. So what's triggering me is what I learned in this whole thing is to accept who I am. I'm a medium. And as a medium, I'm going to see, hear, feel, sense things that other people don't. And we are all intuitive and we all have the ability to do those things. So don't get me wrong. However, what was important in this case was for me to share that when you work in the world of energy, it is possible for one person to give two different energy fields off. Okay? So what he was experiencing was not what I was experiencing. And as his other half, it was very triggering that he wouldn't see it from my point of view and dismissed me. It was very triggering for him because, it was like he doesn't see what the problem was. The oblivious says, oh, she's so nice. Not really. Or at least not to me. It triggered jealousy. It triggered anger. It triggered confusion because I'm not usually a jealous person. So again, I sat with this stuff for 6 months because I'm not normally jealous. I normally don't get upset. I'm usually pretty confident in my relationships. But the key here, I was also triggered because I was recently out of a bad marriage, had been hurt, had been lied to, I had been cheated on, I had been hurt, I had been abused, and I was picking up a lot of that. So I had to separate that. And I did that when I said, why is this triggering me? Why is this bothering me? And I had to separate my feelings from the facts before me. So I was self-aware of what was going on. I was self-aware that this was triggering me and making me angry. And I had to ask the why a lot. There were a lot of tears shed. There was a lot of journaling. There was a lot of soul searching. And it finally came down to, it's time to speak your truth, be authentic, and let the chips fall where they may. So when you find yourself triggered, the first question should be, why is this triggering me? What is this trying to teach me? What is this dredging up? And when you are self-aware like that, you can actually answer those questions and say, well, I feel this way. I felt this way when I was with XYZ, or I felt this way at a previous job, or I felt this way when my sister did this, or my brother did that, or I feel this way because my mom never hugged me. but coming to terms with what is triggering you, why it is triggering you, and how you can get to self-acceptance, or at least accept what you've come up with, and push yourself to learn from it. And then there's a peace. It's like, okay, now I know why this is triggering me. Okay, now I know why this is bothering me. The next question is, what am I going to do about it? So half the battle is acknowledging your triggers and why you're triggered. And then the peace comes after. You're like, I can accept this. And what am I going to do to change it? Am I going to change it? Those might be two separate questions for you. Am I going to change it? And what can I do to change it? I personally, what I've discovered when it comes to peace for my triggers is once I've accepted them, is to meditate on them. Go within to find some peace. It's like, okay, what can I break up? What scar tissue can I break up and remove? What wounds do I want to stitch up? They're never going to go away. You know, emotional scars don't go away. But how can I dull this pain? How can I minimize it to where it's practically invisible? I mean, it would take a lot to trigger me on it. Because when you come to terms with it and you put it in the place it needs to be in your life, you can find peace. You can be at peace with it. Personally, it took me a long time to come to terms and come to peace with who my mother is and where our relationship is. And now that I have found peace with it and come to terms with it and am very aware of it, I can be at peace with her. I can be at peace with the situation. What I've discovered, just being who I am, she's had time to think about things too. And while she may not be fully at peace with certain things, she is fully aware of certain things. And the more she becomes aware, the more we can come to forgiveness and come together in peace. It's slow. I'm reminded of water. Been told a lot about water lately, and what I've learned is to be water. Water is the most powerful force on earth right now. It can be wild and crazy, or it can be slow and steady. It can erode long-term effects. There's a lot going on. It goes deeper and deeper and deeper, and the deeper you go, you learn more about yourself, you learn more about others. But you can also erode the anger, erode the resentment, erode contempt, sorry. A lot of things can come into play when we acknowledge that not so much this too shall pass, but that it will be okay. It's part of our history, but it doesn't have to be part of our present. And every day we learn something new. And when we acknowledge anything that triggers us, it becomes less triggering. It becomes less triggering. So, like, if something is really setting you off, like what I had recently, it's important to acknowledge, hey, why is this triggering me? And what can I do? What did I need to learn from this? And am I going to be okay? And if I don't feel okay, what am I going to do about it? The key to triggers is the self-awareness, and then coming to acceptance, and then maybe taking a walk in nature, or whatever brings you peace. And know that it's not an overnight success. I meditated, everything is better. It might take a while, but the more you discover and learn about yourself, that's like, oh, okay, that I've been there. This person needs to receive a message this way. Or, oh, I've been there, I can help you through this. Or, oh, I've been there and I'm going to step away because I'm only angering you. So it becomes very key on how you respond to. Your triggers teach you a lot about response, other people's response, your response. Are you listening to understand or are you listening to respond? And why are you doing either? The most successful thing you can do when you're being triggered is to listen to understand for yourself and for the other person, or for yourself to understand the situation. And once you understand, you can come to peace with, like, okay, I get it. I don't have to like it, but I get it. I don't have to join that group, but I can respect where they're coming from. And there's a peace to that. There's a piece to just being who you are and being authentic and being you. And if you're like me and have always felt like a Sesame Street song, one of the things just doesn't belong here, that's okay. Because eventually you're going to find the group you belong with, that you can contribute to, that you can be a part of, that loves you the way you are for who you are. So the next time you feel triggered, ask, why am I triggered? What's triggering me? What can I learn from it? How can I accept it? And how can I just move past it or help other people move past it? So I leave you with this. Always remember there is a lesson in the trigger, and peace can come once that lesson is learned. And thank you, everybody. We'll see